There's a community building strategy so effective, it survived hurricanes, the FBI, and the deadliest epidemic of the 20th century. And it was invented by queer Americans on a narrow strip of sand 31 miles from Manhattan, and nobody wrote it down. They just lived it for 40 years. And when AIDS came and the government turned its back, that strategy saved thousands of lives. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how it works. Hi there, I'm Chris with a K, and welcome back to This Week in Queer History, where we uncover strategies and tactics from queer history that still work today. The strategy that we're talking about today is called spatial sanctuary as infrastructure. Well, here's the idea. So finding a safe space is not the strategy, but converting that safe space into durable, layered community infrastructure is the strategy. Economic systems, knowledge networks, governance structures, mutual aid. Each layer built on the one before it, and each layer still functional decades later when everything went wrong. We're talking about the queer communities of Fire Island, Cherry Grove, and the Pines. And they didn't just find a beach to hide on, they built an entire operating system for survival. And in 2026, with queer spaces closing across the country and legal protections being rolled back in real time, this blueprint has never been more relevant.
This week in queer history, stories told with love and glee.
So picture this, it's 1945, and you're a gay man just home from the war. You discovered who you were in the barracks, and now you're back in a country that considers your existence a crime. The GI Bill is building suburbs for everyone, except for you. Banks, they won't even give you a mortgage because you're unmarried. Or even worse, because someone suspects why you're not married. And bars, they're getting raided, jobs are getting pulled, families disown you. Every structure designed to help Americans build a life has a sign on the door that says, "Not for you." So you need somewhere to go. But more than that, you need somewhere to build. And as I was researching and looking into this episode, there was a feeling that I had. That moment that you realize that systems aren't broken, they're working exactly as they're designed, they just weren't designed for you. So what do? You get on a ferry. So let's take it back. On September 21st, 1938, a Category 3 hurricane slammed into Long Island with almost no warning. Cherry Grove, which was a modest seasonal community on Fire Island, was totally destroyed. Hotels were gone, boardwalks were gone. The middle-class families who had been vacationing there decided the risk wasn't worth it anymore. Property values collapsed. But into that vacuum stepped a community that had nowhere safe to go. Gay men and lesbians had been quietly gathering at Cherry Grove since the late 1920s. W.H. Auden spent time there, Christopher Isherwood too, and legend has it that the two of them once arrived dressed as Greek gods, carried on gilded litter. Now, whether that's exactly true or not doesn't really matter, but what matters is that it became the founding myth, because that tells you exactly what Cherry Grove understood itself to be. It was a place that operated under different rules. And after that hurricane, that place became permanent. So here's where the strategy kicks in. These weren't wealthy people moving to a beach resort. These were resourceful people pooling what little they had. Because banks wouldn't give a mortgage to two men. Groups of 4, 6, sometimes 8 friends would collectively purchase a cottage. They split the costs, shared maintenance, governed themselves. This wasn't just a clever workaround for a discriminatory lending system. This was the birth of chosen family as economic infrastructure. So just take a moment to think about that. They turned exclusion into invention. And by the early 1950s, Cherry Grove was one of 3 recognized safe havens for queer Americans, alongside Provincetown and Key West. But Cherry Grove was doing something that others weren't, at least not at the same scale. It was building institutions. In 1948, the community built the Cherry Grove Community House and Theater entirely through collective fundraising and labor. No government grants, no nonprofit umbrella, just the community pooling resources because they needed a space that was theirs. And that building became the first queer community center in America, predating urban LGBTQ centers by 2 decades. decades. And the theater tradition that grew inside it became legendary. Drag shows, campy reviews, original productions, all of it in an era when cross-dressing was illegal in New York City. Performances on Fire Island, they weren't just entertainment. It was news, political commentary, cultural transmission, and identity construction. And it was all happening on a tiny stage on a barrier island where the usual rules didn't apply. And meanwhile, on those narrow boardwalks, because there were no cars on Fire Island, something quiet and profound was happening. Older community members who had survived decades of police raids, blacklists, and family rejection sat on their front porches with young visitors and passed on survival knowledge. Which lawyers would represent you, which doctors wouldn't report you, how to hold a job while holding on to yourself. No textbook, no curriculum, just conversations on a porch at sunset that could save your life. And I keep coming back to this image. The front porch was their classroom. The summer was their semester, and the degree you graduated with was knowing how to survive as a queer person. When Fire Island Pines developed in the 1950s and 1960s as a more affluent companion community, the two towns created something urban planners still struggle to build intentionally, a model of queer pluralism. Cherry Grove was bohemian and theatrical, and the Pines was professional and aspirational, and they were very different. Sometimes they clashed, but they were connected by geography, by shared infrastructure, and by the understanding that what threatened one threatened both. And by the time Stonewall happened in 1969, this community had been running a 40-year experiment in self-governance, and they were about to need every bit of it. So why did this strategy work when so many communities built under pressure simply fall apart? Well, there are three conditions. The first one was the perimeter that they held. The ferry from Sayville to Fire Island functioned as a membrane. Law enforcement access was slow, and it was announced, and it was costly. Strangers were immediately visible, and that geographic buffer gave the community room to experiment without constant threat of disruption. You can't build anything if someone keeps knocking down the walls. And then second, scarcity created solidarity. The post-hurricane land, it was cheap, but individual resources were still limited. So they moved to collective ownership. And it wasn't because of some big idea or they had some huge, passion. It was necessary. And so here's the insight. Practicality and necessity overweighed ideology. People maintained their commitments to this because they had real skin in the game and nowhere else to go. And then finally, this is the one that really matters. They invested in the community, not just the experience. Every layer of infrastructure that they built became the foundation for the next one. Houses created economic units created governance needs, governance created the community house created cultural programming, and that cultural programming created a shared identity. Shared identity created mutual obligation that, when AIDS arrived, meant people showed up for each other without being asked to. Each layer reinforced the last, and nothing was a standalone. Nothing was disposable. And because they had been building for 4 decades before the AIDS crisis hit, they didn't have to start from scratch when the world turned its back. The house model, designed to enable property ownership, was repurposed for medical care. Housemates who had managed shared vacation budgets started coordinating prescriptions, hospital visits, and memorial services. The governance structures built to manage communal property were extended to manage collective grief. The people who showed up at the hospital bedsides when your biological families wouldn't, they were the people from your house. The network that circulated early safe sex information faster than any government channel was the Front Porch Network, adapted for a new kind of survival knowledge. 40 years of building, activated in an afternoon. That's what infrastructure does. Now, before we talk about how we can use this blueprint today, I want to take a second to thank our members. They make this work possible. They help me find and share the moments from queer history that remind us we've always been here and we've always been resilient. If you want to be a part of this, check the link in the description. And if money is tight, I totally get it. But subscribing and leaving a positive review helps us reach more people. Most of all, thank you for being a part of this. All right, let's bring this home. So here's why I think this strategy is so important right now. I've never been to Fire Island, but from what I have been told, the moment you step off that ferry, there's a feeling that shifts in you. The boardwalks, there's no cars, everyone's walking, everyone's carrying groceries in those little red wagons. It feels like someone has designed a place specifically to force you to slow down and actually see the people around you. And I think that's what community is supposed to feel like. Not just proximity, but infrastructure. The whole place is built so you have to interact. You can't drive past someone, you walk past them. You end up on someone's porch with a drink you didn't ask for, talking to someone who's been coming for 40 years. And I think about this a lot in the context of what we're building right here with this channel, with our community. Are we building infrastructure that still works when things get hard? Or are we just creating a nice hangout that disappears when the weather changes? Because in 2026, queer spaces are closing at an alarming rate. Hundreds of gay bars, community centers, and bookstores have shut down since 2019. Legal protections are being rolled back. The physical infrastructure of queer community is contracting just when we need it the most. But the Fire Island model tells us exactly what went wrong. We relied on commercial spaces and state protections instead of community-owned infrastructure. The Grove's Community House survived because the community owned it. The bars that depended on rent and favorable politics did not. So here's our playbook for today. 5 things that we can start doing this week. Number 1, and this may seem weird and a little uncomfortable, but you need to map your chosen family's resources. Who owns property, who's renting, who has stable income, and who doesn't. You can't build house-style solidarity without knowing the lay of the land. Have the conversations with your friends this weekend. Number 2, find or create one community-controlled space. Not a bar, not a park, a space your community governs. Check if a local church, a community land trust, or co-op has room. Attend their next meeting. Number 3, start a weekly intergenerational gathering. I know you may be used to having the friends that are all the same age, but invite someone significantly older than you and someone significantly younger than you to the same table. The explicit purpose is knowledge transfer. This is the front porch. Rebuild it. Number 4, record a conversation with a queer elder in your life. Use your phone, upload it to a shared drive. The Cherry Grove community is losing its oral history tradition as we speak. And it's our job to record that experience and that knowledge so that we can pass it on. Number 5, update your legal documents this week. I know this sounds very boring, but it's so important. This is your will, your healthcare proxy, all of your information, your power of attorney. Make sure that they reflect the choices that you want and that they reflect your chosen family. The AIDS crisis proved that communities with legal frameworks for chosen family were better protected. That lesson applies right now more than ever. The lessons from Fire Island are clear. The communities that survived aren't the ones that found the best location. They're the ones that invested in each other before the crisis came. When AIDS hit Cherry Grove, they didn't have to build a mutual aid network from scratch. They were the network. So build the infrastructure now, not because a crisis is coming, but because the building is the community. So here's my question for you. What spatial sanctuaries are you building? And where are you building them? What does your community house look like? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you want to stay connected with me and this work, the best way is to join the email list. You'll get free queer history downloads, early word on upcoming episodes, and invitations to community moments as we grow together. The sign-up link is in the description. Until next time, stay strong, stay bold, and keep making history.